Good afternoon, everybody. Please rise. Welcome to the Cade Museum for our Rotary Club of Gainesville meeting on this Tuesday, October 18th. I'm Tom Collette, your Sergeant at Arms. For guests visiting us today and visiting Rotarians joining us virtually on Zoom, identify yourself in the chat for us. If you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, you need to register your participation. Send an email, info@rotarygainesville.org. We begin our meeting as we do with song and pledge. Pete on his birthday is not here. Oh, everybody, oh. So you're stuck with me today. You ready to sing God Bless America? And before we start, how about a nice hand for Gordon? He just told me he's been playing piano at our meetings for 20 years. And a member of Rotary for 55 years. That's incredible. Thank you, Gordon. You ready to sing God Bless America, everybody? God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home. Now join me in our Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now time for our invocation, offered today by Ian Fletcher. Ian?
Good afternoon, everyone. Just a brief update on Ann Gaybirch. She is now in Shan's rehab following her hip surgery. For those who may not know, she fell and broke her hip. And so anyone who would like to send her a card, please contact our president, Greg Young, for details. And visitation is also possible. Let us pray. O great Creator, we give thanks for yet another day. We continue to remember the members of Rotary in the counties affected by Hurricane Ian, who are still working to put their lives back together after suffering a terrible disaster. Supply their needs with goods and services that will help them in the process of regaining normalcy. Bless the givers and organizations that work daily to provide for these individuals as we continue to give and support them. As they begin the process of reopening schools for their students, ensure they can continue to learn and make a way for the process to be easy. Bless our speaker today and the Rotarians of this club. Amen.
Thank you very much, Ian. You may be seated. Unless you're visiting us today, either a visiting Rotarian or a guest of one of our Rotarians. Who do we have with the wireless mic today? Brendan? I guess you got it. Greg's going to help. We'll bring the wireless mic to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'd like to introduce my guest today. It's Sarah Duswalt, and she's visiting us first time to see what Rotary is all about, and she's with Worthington Contracting.
For those of you who may have forgot, I'm Bill Zagel, and I'm pleased to have my wife here as my guest, Carol Zagel.
Yes, very good to see you, Carol.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. I'd like to introduce my brother-in-law, Harvey Baxter, who most of you know.
I learned something new. I didn't know you two were brother-in-laws. Good morning, Rotarians. I'd like to introduce my guest from Michigan. His name is Jerry Cowan.
Good afternoon, Rotarians. I'm Richard Allen, and I'm honored today to be able to introduce Danny Alvarado. Danny has kept our companies running and Sustainable Cambodia running on the IT side for years. He's a co-owner of Team Logic, and I think he also keeps the CADE running on that side. So very busy guy. Thank you.
Good afternoon, fellow Rotarians. I'm Colin Burrows. My guest today is Taku Ishii. Taku is the husband of a graduate student and resident in my old department at the vet school. He is a house husband. They have a 6-year-old child, and his visa won't allow him to work, but he's anxious to volunteer. He, back in Japan, in Tokyo, he worked in a dialysis unit. He has a degree in engineering and can do virtually anything. So if any of you know of anybody or anybody, any place that could use the talents of a volunteer for a year, please see him afterwards.
Welcome, Taku.
Welcome all. We have a trio of announcements today. First, welcome to our podium to speak again to us about the Ethics in Business Awards, Robert Mounts. Come on up, Robert.
Given 30 seconds or less to remind you that the deadline for submitting applications for the Ethics in Business Award is just 3 weeks away on November 4th, I believe. And it's to recognize people within the community, and can be, submitted by anyone, not just a Rotarian, for those who exemplify the values of Rotary and also the highest standards of ethics in their business. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Next, we have Brett Buell. Brett. We had one clap. No? So Greg will be standing in for Brett.
Yes, Brett, unfortunately, I guess couldn't be here, so I'll stand in. The announcements about the Wine to Water event that the Downtown Rotary Club does. It's their signature event every year in honor of West Skiles. And so that is happening. I'll do it off the top of my head. I think it's the second. Yes. That would be November 2nd, and it'll be here at the CADE, I believe. And so you can get tickets for that through the Downtown Rotary Club of Gainesville. And please mark your calendars, and I hope you can attend.
Last but not least, our last announcement. Please welcome Lisa Mueller.
All right, I'll stand on my tippy toes so we don't have to move the mic. So the Seafood Spectacular, please save the date. It is November 10th. It is going to be out at Hatchet Creek. Today, Wesley is going to be on the side right here when you head out. Please stop by to grab your tickets. We really are looking for sponsors because our costs for food have doubled. So we have not raised our tickets above $60. If you buy 5, you can get it for $250. So it gives you a little discount. So our sponsorships are incredibly important. They really help us to do this event. And I have had an opportunity to try out the desserts. They are amazing. So please, if you're curious and you'd like to attend the seafood, we'd love to have you. It's November 10th. It is the second Thursday of the month. It will be out at Hatchet Creek, and Wesley will be there at the end of the meeting. And if you'd like to sponsor, we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Without further ado, we turn our meeting today over to your president, Greg Young.
Thank you, Tom. You always do a great job. You're here every week. I appreciate that very much. So welcome, everyone. It's great to see you here at the CADE and those on Zoom. If you are on Zoom, please type in any questions you have early as possible so that we hopefully can get to some at the end of Lars's presentation. First, I'm excited to welcome two new members to our club. If they will please stand, Jean Chalmers and Kim Tanzer. And let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. And I will say, if anybody follows events in Gainesville, you know these two women. They do so much in our community to make our community a better place to live. And if I had a hat, I would tip it to you right now. But thank you and welcome. So I hope everyone saw the email from Jay Nordquist about the Rotary Jaguars collaboration with our district. It's a game that's a fundraiser primarily to end polio. That's where the money goes. And it is on Sunday, November 6th. It's a 1 p.m. game against the Raiders. So nobody knows that one? The Raiders. The Raiders. All right. Anyway, Tom knows. So there are some, not on this table, but on other tables, there are sign-up sheets in the center of the table. There should be some informational sheets. We ran out of those. So if it's of interest at all, we're going to try to collaborate with other clubs so that it's a Gainesville group going up together so you can get to know some of the other club members as well. So I think it could be a really fun event. Awesome. Let's see. Well, next, I'd like to congratulate one of our own members, Jane Moraski. Jane, can you raise your hand or stand? Stand up, please. Thank you. She just now recently was put into a new position as the executive director of the Education Foundation of Alachua County. So thank you, Jane. I know that's going to be a lot of work, but you're up to the task, I'm sure. And you will. I know one of the reasons why you went to that is because you wanted to impact more lives of children. So thank you for that work. Sorry about all the announcements here. Gainesville Sunrise Rotary is hosting their major fundraising event called Dueling Pianos. Please mark your calendars. It's in January, so it's a bit down the road, January 19th. It's a 6 p.m. event, and you'll hear more about that as that gets closer. Lastly, I believe there will be a Rotary Auction Committee meeting today after this meeting, and it's for our annual auction event, which is held this year on December 6th, with the proceeds to benefit Sustainable Cambodia. So if you're on that committee, please meet here afterwards. And at this point, in the interest of time, I'd like to bring John Joplin up to introduce today's speaker. John?
Thank you. I'll tell you up front, I'm here to introduce the speaker, but also to make I started to say shameless plug, but really it's a proud plug for a cause that I know the speaker and I both share passion about. So let me start by saying this. I know this to be a very well-traveled and well-informed group of folks. And I don't say that, well, not just as a suck up to the group in any way. I know it to be literally true. And so I know that if I ask this group, any of you, to name what you would consider to be some of the top natural wonders of the world, what I tend to think of as sort of the crown jewels of God's creation, I think any of you could rattle off a list for me. I know I tend to think of places in North America like the Grand Canyon and the Redwood Forest of California, or South America. I tend to think of the Galapagos Islands and the Amazonian rainforest. There's the savannas of Africa and the Great Barrier Reef of Australia. I won't ask you to raise hands, but I'm guessing that most of the folks here have either had an opportunity to travel to one of those places or have it on your bucket list of places that you want to go to either before you're gone or it's gone. And I know we could all do that. What I wonder though is how many folks also know that you could leave here today after this meeting and go get in your car out here on South Main, and within an hour you could be at North Florida's own equally unique, equally fragile, equally threatened natural wonder of the world. And That's not an exaggeration. And I think our speaker can confirm that for us. The spring system that we have here in North Florida, there's nothing like it on the planet. There is literally no other place on the planet Earth that has the concentration of first magnitude springs that we have within an hour, hour and a half of the spot that we're all sitting in today. And it's a wonder, it's a paradox. Those of you, I hope, who have signed up to go on the Rotary sponsored trip that our speaker is going to lead us on the 19th, right, of November, we'll see it. And for those of you experiencing it for the first time, what you will see is incredible beauty. I'm always struck by folks who come to the Ichetucknee for the first time and are just blown away by the beauty of the place. For those of us who are old timers who have experienced the Ichetucknee for a long time, that's always sort of moving for us because we don't want to discourage that sort of awe, but we also know what it used to be like. And we've seen it, the water change from green to blue, or blue to green rather. We've seen the loss of eelgrass. We've seen the loss of habitat. We've seen the algae growth that we didn't have when I was a kid growing up, or even 30 years ago. I am here not only to introduce Lars, but also as president of, and if we can pull up that slide, the Ichetucknee Alliance, whose motto is, in fact, that's in the back of my hat, bringing back the blue. Because those of you who have been around for a while and remember when the Ichetucknee was, there were places in the Ichetucknee the color of your tablecloth that we don't see that anymore. And it's because of factors that are fixable. It's because of factors that poor stewardship by human beings, quite frankly. And it's really pretty simple. We're sucking too much water out of the Florida aquifer, and we're putting too much garbage in it. And both of those things have solutions that are practical and common sense and equitable to all involved. We just have to have the will to do it. So you have on your tables little brochures about our group that discuss some of these problems. I would welcome you to take those with you. I would welcome all of you to go to our website and frankly to sign up with us, join the Ichetucknee Alliance. We are an advocacy group specifically for the Ichetucknee, but we are advocating for issues that are common to all of our North Florida springs and that indeed affect all of our drinking water, because we all are drawing from the same source. The water that I tubed in as a kid and we still enjoy today on the Ichetucknee is essentially from the exact same source that your tap is coming from. It's all drawn from the aquifer. So when we have problems with the springs, it's sort of the canary in the mine for the rest of these. I am proud to be able to introduce Lars Anderson to the group today, who does indeed share my passion for the preservation of this natural wonder that we have in our own backyard here. Lars has been an environmental educator and writer and tour guide for pushing 40 years. Am I right, Lars? Okay, I gave a few too many there. What Lars has done to educate the public about these beauties, these natural wonders of Florida, it can't be described in an introduction through audio books and books. But I think most importantly, as he and I were discussing before we started, through providing the immersive, transformative experience of getting folks out on in these beautiful places, from Cedar Key to the Ichetucknee to our springs. There is nothing like being in these places and surrounded by these places to make folks appreciate what we have and what we are in real danger of actually losing. As I said to Lars, I don't think it's possible for someone to go on one of these tours that Lars has led and come away thinking, well, so what? If you don't care about these places now, you ought to join Lars on one of his tours. So we're very pleased and very fortunate to have with us Lars Anderson. Take it away, Lars.
Hello, everybody. Nice to meet y'all. Hey. Thank you. So I'm a little more used to doing this out on rivers, just be warned. And so I don't give many slideshows. Some of these shots are a little bit, maybe a little bit fuzzy. I kind of pull things together to tell the story. There we go. That's what I was looking for. And also some of these talks that I give are a little bit longer than others. So I have a lot more pictures today than I need. So I might kind of bump through a few of them pretty quickly. I'll spare you, full slideshow. Basically, even though it's PowerPoint, it's just a glorified slideshow. I'm old school. I don't have a lot of text and all those kind of things. So, and my tours, and actually I was doing the math after John said that, it has been about 40 years that I've been writing about Florida. The tours I've been doing for about 25 years. That's my full-time job. Still writing. But this is kind of a general map of Florida just to kind of zoom in on what we're talking about. So I don't know if this pointer works. Maybe not. Probably not. Okay, that's all right. Well, you know where Ichetucknee is. I'm sorry, I'm going back now. Well, going the wrong way. I'm sorry. I'm going back. I'm trying to get back. I know it's got a delay here. That's the problem. Well, that's all right. There we go. Okay, so this, you saw the big map. I was kind of showing some of the rivers I do. I do about 80 different waterways in my tours all over North Florida. Within a couple of hours of here, like John was talking about, that's the base of my operations. Tomorrow I'm doing Cedar Key, but we do the East Coast some and everything in between. And on this map, you can see Ichetucknee there. Since I don't have my pointer going, I'm just gonna have to point things out. But you see the Ichetucknee there, you see the Swanee and the Santa Fe that Ichetucknee flows into. All these springs, I mean, there's 1,021 springs in Florida. Most of those are within a couple hours of Gainesville. And on the Swanee, Santa Fe River is really the hub of all those springs. It's a fantastic area that we live in. More recently, they've been calling it the Springs Heartland. Those of you who grew up in the area, we just knew we had a lot of springs in the area, but now it's becoming a real thing. And there are efforts to make it sort of a recognized national park or feature like John was talking about, which would be interesting. I know there's a delay in this thing. There we go. So there's a picture of the spring just to get us started. Most of you have seen the Ichetucknee Spring, I'm assuming. Unbelievable. There's that blue water. At the head spring itself, it's still pretty blue. You go work your way downstream, it's starting to get more and more greenish, like John was talking about. It's a problem we're seeing more and more on all of our springs. There's a little shot of the head spring area. And it's going to look like that. It changes seasonally a lot. It's going to look a lot like this for the paddle trip, just so you know. These flowers, these burr marigolds are coming out now, and we get some fall color. If you have any friends that don't believe Florida has fall color, take them on a river, the North Florida River. Mid-November through mid-December. It's unbelievable. Red maples, ash trees, it's fantastic. And so those of you who grew up in this area probably had a childhood like this. This is actually just downstream from John's house. It was down by the mouth of the Ichetucknee River. A couple of little kids, just playing. A lot of us had these kind of childhood memories with the springs. And that's what they look like when they see they're being taken a picture of. I get the stink eye once they looked up and saw me taking a picture. I had to include that. But for everybody, whether we grew up on these springs and waterways, or if we're new to the area, at some point you kind of step back and look at that water. And this is kind of tagging on to a lot what John was saying. That was a good lead in for a lot of what I've been saying. But you look at that water and it's just like miraculous. You see it coming out of the ground. It's millions of gallons a day, 230 some million gallons a day coming out of the Ichetucknee Springs group. It's just a miracle. You just wonder about the fact that this water is coming out of this ground, this miracle of this natural wonder. And you just think, that water's been coming out of this ground forever, and it's going to continue coming out of this ground forever. It's just this natural thing that the earth is doing. But that's not the case. As it turns out, these springs that we have in North Florida, Ichetucknee, all of them, have only been flowing for about maybe 6,000 to 7,000 years. So the first half of the time period that people have lived in Florida, they didn't have springs. They didn't have flowing springs, which is something to think about. And it's, springs kind of grew and got wetter and flowing more. And now we're kind of like on the decline again. So it's something to really sort of visualize. But to understand how that works and what exactly is going on, since we're doing our paddle trip, We'll talk a lot more about the nature and what's going on now on the paddle trip. And so today I was just going to focus a little bit about the geology and sort of and some of the history that will not be so obvious on the paddle trip. But basically, and some of this stuff, the really good thing about this is that it gives you an idea not only of how the Ichetucknee is formed, but North Florida in general, just the terrain, our landscapes, sinkholes, and all that. It's a real simple sort of geology. 5 minutes, I'll make it painless. But Florida is probably all you know, was under the sea for millions of years, tens of millions of years. And during that time, all the sea life died, settled to the bottom, all their hard parts settled down onto this peninsula, this kind of submerged sandy peninsula, rocky peninsula. And for millions of years, that settled, all their body parts built up and slowly formed this limestone plateau, just shell bits. It's all animal parts, all this limestone, a couple thousand feet thick. Later, you know, after that was formed, during the ice ages of the last couple million years, as sea levels rose and fell like over a dozen times because of the ice caps would freeze and sea level would go down. The shoreline would fluctuate. So that outer dotted line that I can't point to, that was during the freezes when the ice caps were frozen. People first came to Florida during one of those freezes. So that was the shoreline when those first people came, that dotted line. At other times when the ice caps melted, shorelines came in different heights, you know, different amounts inland for those rises of the sea level. But the dark green area in the middle there, that was a shoreline about 125,000 years ago. And hard to point out here, but that kind of runs through Gainesville. We would have been sitting on this island, basically out 8th Avenue, the big hill going down towards 34th. You'd have been standing on this shoreline, looking out over open ocean. University Avenue by the Women's Club, the old Women's Club, I guess it still is. Same thing, those hills. But that feature goes all the way around over the Panhandle, Tallahassee, ancient shoreline. While that water was standing there, it kind of washed the sands and clays off that had sort of built up in previous low water periods and sort of exposed the limestone. So that's why all the, you know, the green stuff has been out of water for millions of years, longer than the stuff just below that, including just outside of Gainesville. It's a little bit complicated, but not too bad, I don't think. Anyway, so it came and went several times. 15,000 years ago, when people first came to Florida, it was the very end of the last ice age. And so the shoreline was there at that dotted line there. Very cold or cool, dry conditions, a lot of savannas and these kind of oak savannas that we don't have anymore. Just a very different Florida. The channels, what we now know as the river channels, had already been formed during previous low water periods. So the channels were there, but they were just dried out. The springs, like Ichetucknee Springs, Silver, these big ones, would have just been these deep water holes. Very important for those first people, so that people would have that water to drink. Wildlife would come there to drink, mammoths and mastodons and all these crazy ice age animals that were here. And so those watering holes became very important, sacred. And for thousands of years, that's all the people had in this area. Slowly, you know, 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, the climate is warming, still coming out of that last ice age. And the shoreline's coming in, that dotted line is now moving in towards Cedar Key. Yeah. The aquifer is coming up. At some point, maybe 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, and probably over a period of time, the water table rose, overflowed the banks of those spring basins and filled the old channels again. So now these people who had been here for, you know, 7,000 to 8,000 years, now suddenly had these waterways, not only for fishing, but for travel. So they could canoe and move around a lot easier than they did before and trade. So they're now starting to trade as far as Cuba. You know, they go out Swanee River along the coast, across to Cuba, trading, and just changed lifeways completely. They can now make villages, burial mounds and things like that. It just became much more sedentary, changed everything completely for those people. That's kind of an illustration of what one of those old channels might have looked like back before that. You know, there would have been some wet periods off and on, even during the dry periods. So it would temporarily have some little water catchment areas. Payne's Prairie, for instance, it would fill up once in a while with some water. So there are a lot of early Paleo Indian sites out by the Ellet's house. I saw you back there, Ed. That's where I used to spend my childhood in their backyard out in Paynes Prairie, just a little plug for the prairie there. But it would fill once in a while. So there's some Paleo Indian sites there too. So Springs, Prairie, places like that were just really significant to those early people. And there's a graphic shot of going after mammoths and mastodons. I included this one. It's not a very good picture, but it just kind of shows the habitat around and the early camels. We had camels here, horses, all kinds of strange things were evolving here and then disappeared here, continued evolving other places. But I really wanted to show it because that really kind of arid environment that is in their background there. That's much more what Florida looked like. You know, so the Florida that we know today with all these trees and palm trees and sort of semi-tropical, that's only last 7,000 to 8,000 years. It's an important point to sort of think. And also another sort of important thing to me to think about with that is that this Florida that we know, people were here evolving with the ecosystem. So it was not like people came here and found this place and learned it and everything. The plants and animals that are here partially because they co-evolved with these people. And that's not to say that we're, equally good stewards of this land, but it is worth keeping that in mind because you go to shell middens and old village sites and you'll see plants that we know that Native people used a lot and they're much more abundant around shell mounds, and it's not a coincidence. It's not. So now the water has come back in, the rivers are flowing. This is the Ichetucknee downstream. This is in the spring when the seeds are coming out on the red maples. A lot of flowers, very diverse ecosystems. We know this from the ecologists that Florida springs are some of the most diverse freshwater habitats in the world. It's because the clear water allows light to penetrate all the way to the bottom. So plants can thrive 20, 30 feet down. And when you have that much plant life, you get a lot of animal life along with it. So it's just incredibly diverse ecosystems. That just illustrates the canoe travel, a little bit out of order here. Yeah, some of the lifeways of the people as it was all changing, some big shell middens and things like that. I'll go through. When the Europeans first arrived, the cultures had changed and evolved a little bit, but it was Timucua, this whole region from Orlando north up into central Georgia almost was all Timucua. And within that was a number of chiefdoms. So this would have been Patano, they controlled Paynes Prairie, different groups. Agua Calican was the one at Ichetucknee. And that's what some of them might have looked like. They used all kinds of interesting garb. This is a pretty typical Timucua man. They had their hair up in these little top knots, heavily tattooed, big fish bladders. That's a fish bladder in his ear that I would put in there and inflate. It's kind of interesting sort of accessories. There's one really interesting old account. It wasn't Florida, but John Smith, the old explorer with Pocahontas and all that. He tells this story. I can't believe the movie industry hadn't got onto this story, but he talks about the natives. They're putting little green snakes alive through their pierced ear, and these snakes would be like, it's the craziest image. And someday, somebody's going to pick up on that one. You'll see it in the movie one of these days as soon as they read John Smith. It's crazy. And DeSoto came through. He was the first one really to see parts of Florida. Narvaez, there was an explorer before DeSoto, Narvaez, but DeSoto is the one who really kind of came through and made bigger impacts. Stayed at Ichetucknee. He had come up through the peninsula from Tampa area, roughly. Not finding much food sources, things like that in the peninsula. But when he got to Ichetucknee, the Indians there had a lot of corn, a lot of stores. So we wound up staying there for a few weeks, causing a lot of mischief and kidnapped the chief and the chief's daughter and just acting like conquistadors, not very nice guys. This picture, there's some missionaries. Just ignore the background. That's a desert background. We did not have saguaro cactus, but this is the best picture I could see of some Franciscan monks in their robes. But we had this mission system. The Spanish wanted to really establish a firmer control on the interior of Florida. They had St. Augustine beginning in the 1560s, but they really wanted to extend their control into the interior of Florida. And so they established this chain of missions across North Florida. There's one in San Francisco Hammock, and that hammock's named after a mission. You probably know that. San Francisco mission was in there And that name just morphed over the years into San Velasco. But there's a big one at Ichetucknee called San Martin, and a number of them around. Very important part of our story, though, North Florida story, but especially Santa Fe and Ichetucknee River. About 100-year period. There's a picture of some of the missions. So it started at St. Augustine, went right across North Florida, over all the way to the Tallahassee area. And at Paynes Prairie, which is a little south of that main road that you see there. But Paynes Prairie was very significant for this thing too, just because they had a big cattle ranch, the Lachua Ranch. I think it was the largest cattle ranch in Spanish Florida, covered not only Paynes Prairie, we sort of associated with Paynes Prairie, but this ranch really covered much of Alachua County. It was huge, very big Spanish cattle ranch. They named it Lachua after the sink, which was, and then that name evolved into Alachua County. So that was the place origin. Those people, and I'm going to just skip a lot of stuff here, but slowly the mission period ended. All those Native Americans, the Timucua and the Appalachee who were out in the Panhandle, all those tribes had to kind of coalesce around St. Augustine, the remnants of them. And by the by the mid 1700s, there was nobody living in interior Florida. Those people all lived around St. Augustine, and Creek Indians from North Georgia, Alabama moved in and slowly kind of became Seminoles that we know. You can just tell by his garb. This is Micanopy, by the way. He didn't really live at Micanopy, but he was the chief at that time. But you can see just by his garb, they were much more European, had much more contact with the Europeans by the time they got here. Very different people. And they were, a lot of our place names, most of our river names and just Indian place names in general in Florida are from the Seminoles, even though they didn't get here till 1750s. They'd been raiding in here for decades before that. But 1750s on, they started to really live here up until like the early 1800s or maybe mid 1800s, so a century, but yet almost all of our place names, Ichetucknee River, any Indian name you can think of is Seminole. For some reason, we've really lost almost all those early Timucua names of things. Very few of them. Ocala is a Timucua name, and I could name on one hand the ones around here, very few. There's William Bartram. He doesn't really apply to this story. He came across this area, Paynes Prairie, but he did not go up as far as Ichetucknee. It would have been nice to get his descriptions of Ichetuckney. I would have loved that. Seminole Wars. Yeah, I won't go into all that, but there was a big fort up by the Ichetuckney, Fort White. The town is named after. Well, it doesn't show in here, but anyway. But the fort wasn't where the town is. The fort was down by the Santa Fe River. They just made the town and named it for an old feature. Some Seminoles. And so Civil War comes and goes. Not much happens in that area except for like the Battle of Olustee, which wasn't that far from there. But at Ichetucknee itself, not much was going on. But after the Civil War, immediately after, a planter from up north bought all the property along Ichetucknee, both sides, all the way from the Head Spring down to Santa Fe River, and was logging and doing all kinds of raising different crops. They did some logging out of there, but mostly crops, not so much the cedar. Some little ferries in the area, some of the waterways. I'm going to try to buzz through some of this. Phosphate was a big part of the Ichetucknee story. If you walk around on the trails today, you'll see a lot of the old pits and land scars from that. There was a phosphate company, Dutton Phosphate, bought much of the property, everything above Highway 27 in late 1890s, and were mining, and that's where most of those pits came from for that period. Loncala Phosphate then bought it in 1920, but really didn't do much with the phosphate for about 20 or 30 years. They leased out for turpentine industry, people to come in and tap the pine trees and all that, but really didn't do much with the phosphate in the mines for a while there. But then in the 1950s, they came back in and started to kind of reprocess a lot of the material that had been mined before. Without starting new pits, they just started kind of reworking the pits that were already there. But yeah, a big part of the Ichetucknee story has to do with that, because you'll see remnants of that industry all over the place. And so, the last of these pictures are really more just some of the plants and animals that I was going to talk about, but since we have sort of a limited time, I will spare you that. I mean, maybe I'll just click through some pictures, but I will mention, I was talking about the underwater vegetation and the submerged vegetation in the spring. Ichetucknee, very diverse, like I was talking about historically, and I'm only talking like 20, 30 years ago, recent history. There was about 5 to 9 co-dominant plant species in the river, and 5 to 9 because it was just different transects where they did the measurements. Today, there's about 3, so some of the plants are more hardy and can take the pollutants a little bit better than others. So some of the weaker plants have died back and they're still kind of around in small numbers. And then a couple of the plants that are very hardy, like eelgrass, are actually doing a little bit better. So you look in that water and you see all this flowing eelgrass meadows. It's beautiful. But in its healthiest state, it would have been a much more diverse kind of a habitat. Just thought that would be worth throwing in there. And this kind of is a good example of that. This shows some of the diverse plants. Red Ludwigia, incredible, beautiful plant there. But yeah, so I'll just buzz through these things. Some snails. Snails are a big part of the ecology of that river. But you'll hear a lot of that on the river trip. Birds and things. Oh, beavers. So yeah, this little guy, he was so sure I wasn't seeing him. He's hiding behind that little blade of grass, peeking out at me like he's got the best camouflage in the world. I love that picture. But there are beavers on the river. There's a beaver lodge there out in the grassy flats area. Ichetucknee, the name means place of the beavers. That was a Seminole name that meant place of the beavers. They were here then. They were trapped out of North Florida during the fur trapping era. And their range has expanded back into Florida, into the Ichetucknee, Santa Fe, Swanee River Basin. But no further south. So you won't find them down Ocala anywhere. Reptiles, there's all kinds of great wildlife. We don't see many water moccasins, but they're out there. Not many gators either, but just for fun, I threw some of these pictures in. But it's a rare day you even see one alligator in Ichetucknee. It's just always been that way. And I always thought that was a pretty recent thing. But looking through old documents and chronicles, it seems like it's just always been that, well, within 100, 150 years of people talking about it, it seems like Ichetucknee always had a reputation for having very few gators. Most people don't mind that too much. I like to see more gators, but it does have a lot of turtles. And there's probably some, no meager coincidence, a lot of turtles, fewer gators. But anyway, I'll cut it off there. Perfect. You good?
Thank you, Lord. Well, I wanted to leave you a few minutes for questions, Lars, from the audience. So if there's any questions in the crowd or on Zoom, we'll try to go back and forth between audience and Zoom.
Hello.
Thank you very much. Do you have any predictions for sea level rise in the next 50 years and affecting this area?
I mean, it's hard to say. It's definitely rising. And with my tours, that's one of the downsides of what I do. I'm on the front lines of seeing these changes. I mean, I can't turn away. We're seeing the springs declining, as John mentioned, not only losing their flow, but with that loss of flow, they're losing their color. But climate change and this loss of the springs in North Florida, we have this kind of unique combination of things because everything that happens as a result of climate change is very interwoven with our loss of the aquifers. Because climate change is going to change rain patterns. Well, rain is the source of all that water coming out of the springs. It might be underground for centuries, some of that water, but it all started as rainwater. So those two things will intersect and work with each other and kind of compound each other in some ways. And then where I'm really seeing the most is at the shorelines, at the coast. Our Gulf Coast here with Chassahowiska and Homosassa, Crystal River, all those springs along the coast there. That nature coast along there, the Suncoast Keys, people call it. If you haven't been there lately, if you have any doubters in your world who just wonder about climate change, take them over there. There's a swath, at least a mile wide, running that whole coast. Every tree is dead, and every species. It's not like a disease where it would just be one species dying. Everything, and mangroves are kind of slowly replacing them, moving in, but it's dramatic and awful. It's just in my 25 years doing tours out there. I've been out there as a kid, but when you're young, you're not paying attention to what plants are there and whatever. But in my 25 years of really paying attention, the changes I've seen are just dramatic and heartbreaking. But there again, that coastline is fed by a lot of springs flowing offshore. So not only is the sea level rise affecting that, there's less freshwater coming off from the land too. So it's just compounding that like die off of plants along the shore. So yeah, it's definitely happening. As far as predictions of time, it's hard to say. It seems to be accelerating. There was sort of a rate that it was going in my first 10 years of business. And these past 15 years, it's like things are happening faster.
We have one more quick one here.
Okay.
I had a quick question. I think about the story last week that came out with the Alaskan snow crabs. 90% have been lost since 2018, and the invasive species that are in the Everglades. And just wondering if there's any change in wildlife over the past 100 years in the rivers and springs.
Yeah, we have a lot of. Thank you. That's a good question. There are a lot of exotic species that have come in, plants and animals. There's a lot of efforts to sort of try to mitigate that. Some are more invasive and harmful than others that, kind of really bump out the native things. Some not as much. So there's a lot of effort to address those things, but it's a long list. It's too long of a list to really go into, but there are big issues. Yeah. And fortunately, we don't have the pythons and all that out of the Everglades yet, but no telling what's going to happen with that. But the damage they're doing down there is just mind-boggling. It's unbelievable. Yeah, manatees are coming up the river more than they used to. So yeah, a lot of change in that. With things getting warmer, we're seeing manatees around the panhandle more than we used to during the wintertime too. So a lot of species are naturally moving north also.
So real quickly, just quick second. I'm new here. I've been here about a year and 2 months, and I hear about this place and I want to come and paddle boat and do all that kind of stuff. But you also just mentioned gators, water mocks. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go there. So what is there? And, just real quickly.
We do. I mean, all Florida water has alligators. Ichetucknee, if you don't want to see an alligator, Ichetucknee and Santa Fe River are really good ones to do. You probably won't see any. And if you do, they'll want to be very big. And some snakes, but all these animals really like to keep to their own. They don't want anything to do with us, including the alligators, really. So yeah, not that we're admitting anyway, right? Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Lars. Thank you. So Lars, I want to thank you for your talk today and what you bring to the community. You're a great resource to help us appreciate the natural beauty of this area. And hopefully we can work to preserve that. I know there's a lot of people in this room that would love to do that, work with you on that, and work with the Alliance. Ichetucknee Alliance as well. So we'll be hearing more about that during the paddle trip, which is, give me the date again, November 19th. It's on a Saturday. We're going to have a paddle trip with Lars leading. John will be there. He's hosting a barbecue after out on the river. So it'd be a great day. Please come. So Lars, on behalf of the Rotary Club of Gainesville, I want to present you with this token of our thanks that we will be giving a donation to the Cade Museum here to help support some of the programs they do for underserved children. So thank you, Lars. Yes. Thank you. My apologies on that one. So thank you everyone for attending today. Hope you can join us again next week when our speaker will be our very own Richard Allen. Richard, where are you? Back there. Richard Allen. He will be speaking to us about sustainable Cambodia and the upcoming auction they will be having. And they are, as many of you know or may not know, they are the very internationally successful Rotary initiative that began here in our club to help villages in Cambodia. So please continue to grow our club by bringing people to come visit and see what Rotary is all about. And remember, as we grow more, we can do more. What did I see today that I wanted to? I'm not there yet, Jacob. You got the winning ticket. Is that what you're saying? Okay, here's a couple of quick quotes. First, we forget that the water cycle and the life cycle are one. Jacques Cousteau. And this one I borrowed off your emails that you send out at the tagline at the bottom. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. T.S. Eliot. Okay. Lucky number is 479, last three digits 479, and we
Bingo.
are adjourned.